What's going on? I just picked up this General on Friday and we went out this weekend on it, and the roof hits the enclosed trailer. So in this video we're gonna go over how to chop the cage. I've seen a couple videos and pictures, but nothing really kind of shows how it's done. Kind of just shows the beginning and the end kind of. Apparently we're gonna cut somewhere around this weld, take this section out, cut this bar out. But in this video we're just gonna go over exactly everything to cut. I'm probably not going to video any of the cutting and welding and stuff like that, just because it's really not important. I'm just going to go over what you need to do it, and I'm probably going to take this rear section of the cage out. That way we're not cutting and throwing sparks all over the bike here, because sometimes the sparks will melt into the plastic, or if you leave them anywhere with the dew or next time it gets wet, the plastic will start rusting where all that metal went. So let's try to get this rear cage off and see what we're going to cut. We'll cut it, I'll tack it, and then we'll bring it back here and we'll see how it fits, and then we'll adjust from there. Let's go. All right, we got the rear section of the cage out. It's actually pretty simple, and it took about 15-20 minutes. You probably will need a helper though to pull it out, because this is a little tight. You got to push the roof up. You got to open these out because they have kind of like a groove back here that locks in with the other elbow. But I'll go over real quick what you need for all the cage bolts. They're all 15mm sockets. You're gonna have 2 on the top on each side, and then 2 right there on the bottom on each side. You could access that with the bed open. You're gonna have to take the seat belts off, be right around here. Seat belts is gonna be a 16 bolt, and you're gonna need a 18 wrench to hold the nut on the back. And then there's also this piece here that's bolted to the cage, and you're gonna need a T30 to remove these. There's 2 on each side, and be careful because they got little nuts that fall off on the back. And then how I had the roof, you got this bracket on the back of the roof there, and that's kind of what pinches the roof on, holding it all together, and that is a T40. So that's pretty much all the tools you're gonna need to take the rear section of the cage off. Now we'll go to the rear section of the cage, mark the 4 inches, and start cutting. All right, you can see here I've made a couple marks 4 inches up from this weld where this little elbow is. I got a couple of them all the way around to try to keep nice and square on both ends. But what I am going to do first is cut this bracket out. It'll be a little bit easier to cut everything off. So let me cut that bracket out, and then we'll tape up the cage and take the 4 inches out of that. All right, here we can see we got our crossbar out. I didn't cut crazy close to that weld, because everything I did read about this crossbar is that you're gonna have to take a section out. So I just cut just past the weld, so you don't have to get crazy going in there and grinding that weld out and trying to take it out. You cut both sides with the angle grinder, but you are gonna need Sawzall for the bottom and top, which is what I use. And there's, you can see where that little brace was there that you got to cut. It's only like spot welded in 2 spots. Here you can see I got our tape marked at 4 inches. If you wrap the tape all the way around and you start, or you end right back where you started, you should have a square cut there. And then for the bottom one, I'm really not going to mark, because I'm just going to try to cut this weld out, so we only have 1 weld, and I don't have 1 weld stacked on top of another. Try to make it look more factory. So let me get this cut, and then I'll come back. Quick note, put an arrow on your tape of what side you want to cut on, because I almost messed this one up and cut on the top. So just a little note. All right, so we got our legs cut off, and just as I thought, in there's kind of a sleeve that goes inside this pipe here. So you don't just want to cut all the way through this. So this one's going to take a little bit longer. We're going to have to just try to cut the weld off so we could reuse that sleeve to make that joint stronger. It's just going to be really hard to get inside of these indentations. So maybe that's going to be the only place where I probably have to cut, and at least that sleeve's on the front and back. Let me cut the one off and we'll see what it looks like. All right, so here's the piece we're trying to save. You can see it there. That's where that tube slides over that collar. So the hard part is going to be to cut the weld in there and there. What I did, I cut it long and then sliced it on the top in the bottom. And then I cut it again once I knew where I was past it. And then I started opening it up like that. I don't have to cut all the way through, and I could try to break it. Got the little Dremel. We're gonna see how many blades it takes and see how much we could preserve of that. So let's keep going at it. All right, so this is what's gonna take the longest, is getting that weld off on the inside of this tube. This first one I cut probably only like 1/2 inch past this. This one I'm gonna cut more. That way I could get the plier and kind of work the metal and try to break it off once I get that weld ground down enough. I've used the burr bit, the Dremel. It's really almost impossible to get that perfect inside. I got it pretty close there. I still got to clean them up before welding. But if anything, I'll probably just grind a little bit of the inside of the tube before sliding it on there to make sure it goes all the way down. So now to the second one. This took about, I don't know, 30-40 minutes. So hopefully the second one will be a little bit faster now that I got it a little bit more figured out. All right, we got everything cut up and ground as best as we can. We're about 2 hours in now. If I had a vise or better burr bits, I probably could have got much better. So what I ended up doing was I ground just a little bit on the insides on each one. So kind of go over it, and then I'll weld it all together, fit it in. So let's put it on the bike and dry fit it, and we'll tack it and then weld it up. All right, so here we are, the test fit. All I did was tighten up these 2 bolts because they do have some kind of interlocking piece from this to the top to get the angle right. So I did tighten these 2 bolts. I left these 2 bottom ones loose. And you can see we're pretty close to where we got to go, even with that 4 inches out. So we just got to move these in a little bit. Then drop the roof. I'll probably tack on each side. And I'll see about getting the crossbar put in, and then we'll take it back off, fully weld it, put it back on, test fit it. If everything goes good, take it back off, paint it, and we'll be done. So let's get this tacked. All right, so we got it here on the other side of the house on the rental where I got the welder at, and got the ratchet strap from the hoop here to the rear rock bar. It's holding down pretty good. As you can see, we're pretty tight back here. We're a little bit open here, and we're open back here. So I'm gonna mark everywhere where it's tight, take some off. Same thing on the other side. Sorry, the AC's running. You can see we're real tight right there, and as we get to the front, we're a little bit open. It probably has something to do with all the angles changing. So I'm just gonna mark everything, grind it a little bit to get a little bit of a tighter gap, and then we'll tack it up. All right, I did a little bit of trimming. It came out a little bit better. I'm pretty happy with it. In the front, still a little bit fat. I wish I would have got that a little closer, but I probably mess with this all day and not get it perfect. So you got that sleeve in there, and it's going up and down, so all that will be filled with weld. It'll still be a solid joint, but you see it's much tighter now. So I'm gonna give it a couple tacks. We'll take it off, weld it, and then we'll give it another test fit. All right, we got the cage on. I did shortcut one thing. I didn't put it back on to weld this bar up. I welded everything up. Figured it was good. So I welded that bar in place. I cut about 3/4 of an inch off, and it was too much. And it wouldn't reach on that side. Everything bolted matched up, but that side. So we had to cut it in half here. And you can see probably got about a 3/8 gap there. So I'm gonna have to sleeve this with something and weld that in here. And we scratched up the paint a little bit, putting it back in here, and scratched up this sticker. So I would recommend take these push pins out here in the front. It gives you a little bit more space. And the other thing is, when you cut this piece here down so you could fit the bracket in, that is where this stuff fits. So you have to kind of shave it down. This is just to keep the seatbelt away from your neck, so it's not super important. But you can see here, I kind of trimmed it off there, and you can see I trimmed the back piece off there so it'll fit. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. Well, there we are. It's about 5 hours after we started. I also Did change the winch rope out for a synthetic rope, and I'm gonna be adding the Polaris remote and the auto shut off for the winch. We did that while the paint was drying on the cage. Lessons learned: don't put the crossbar in without test fitting it, tacking it in place. Don't do it on the ground even though you think you welded up the whole assembly and everything's good. It was just, I did one shortcut and it cost me. So now we're gonna have to sleeve that and weld that back together. We're gonna have to sand some of this down and touch it up. We're trying to fight it to get it on there and it didn't work. And here are the seat belt things installed. You have to trim here and on this bottom side here. Another thing, make sure you put that bar back on the same orientation. And then now how the cage is shorter, you got this rubber was like an S. You can see where the old hole is right there. I just made a new hole up and attached it there. And this, all it does is so you could go up or down so it doesn't rub your neck, which would have been nice to know this weekend. But it looks pretty good, besides the fuck up I did there. If you guys got any questions, drop them in the comment section and I'll see if I get to them. Let me know how you think it looks. See you on the next video.